Oh, hello. Yeah, what are you doing? Are you helping?
No.
No, okay. Are you just going to look cute?
No.
Yes, I know. Yes, you position yourself there. Hello. We are back with another Q&A. You asked me questions and I'm here to answer them while making moss poles, cuddling my baby and having a nice coffee. And I know you guys are gonna ask about it because it's so bloody cute. Look at this coffee mug.
Wow.
I know, almost as cute as you. I got it in Bangkok.
Wow.
Yes, super cute. Huh? Should we get started?
Wow. Wow.
Hello everybody and welcome back to our YouTube channel. A couple of weeks ago I released a Q&A video, but we didn't manage to answer all the questions. I actually only managed to go through half of them. So today we're looking at the second lot of questions and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Now, with all of my Q&A videos, they're kind of podcast style. I will be making some original Sydney plant guy moss poles over here, the open style ones, which you've probably seen me make many times. But apart from that, it's not going to be super visual. So it's really something that you can put on in the background and maybe go and care for your plants, go water your plants, something like that, kind of podcast style. You do not need to be glued to the screen. I will also leave all of the questions with timestamps in the description so you can go ahead and skip to the question that you're most interested in. But of course I would appreciate if you could watch as much of this video as possible. Watch time is my most important metric, so you can sniff, just don't eat it, yeah? This one is actually not toxic, so it's technically okay for him to eat it, but I don't want him to get in the habit of eating my plants, you know what I mean? If you can watch as much of the video as possible, that would be highly appreciated. Watch time is my most important metric, so yeah, I hope you're gonna watch all of it. But I can understand, time is precious. Please feel free to use the description to skip to the most relevant part to you. Hey! You think I don't see you there now? You pretend like you're sniffing it and then you're taking a little munch. Maybe you have to be banned from the table if you can't behave. I'm gonna answer that question without it even being a question. How do I stop Brad from eating all of my plants? I actually do nothing. He genuinely isn't interested. He likes to play with them sometimes when he's trying to get my attention because it's a fail-safe way of getting my attention. The only one he's intrigued by is the oxalis. And I know that, you know, you can put oxalis in salads and so on. It is actually edible. Not sure if it's desirable to be eaten. I think if you eat too much of it, it can have like some kidney issues or something like that. Anyway, I don't want him to eat it, but if he takes a bite from that plant, I'm not concerned. With all the other plants, he's kind of smart enough to know that they're no good for him, right? So you're just a little angel, huh? Am I not so lucky having you in my life? So lucky. Yes, I like you better on this side of the table. I'm also going to start cutting the mesh to size. I always use the same width. I always use 15 squares. Each square is around about 1 by 1 centimeter. I think it's technically 1.25 by 1.25 or something like that. So approximately 15 squares gives you a circumference of about 18 centimeters and then a diameter of approximately 6, right? And that is the perfect medium between being skinny enough so that it doesn't take a whole lot of moss, but it's thick enough to have stability and also thick enough to retain enough moisture. So I go with 15 and that way I can make them all in bulk and then later on they can fit on any plant. Whichever plant just needs an extension, I can just pop it on there. I don't need to make specific extensions for specific plants that are about to reach it, right? So I'm basically kind of in like spring preparation, and I know we technically have 2 more months of winter ahead of us, but I know that once we hit beginning of September, I'm gonna be really busy doing spring prep in the garden, doing spring prep in here, moving plants outside, repotting, and so on. So all of the kind of basics, the like making moss poles, so I've just got them and I can use them, I'm trying to get on top of right now, ideally for pretty much the whole summer season. What are some countries you absolutely want to travel to and why? Number one on the list is definitely South Africa. I really want to go to South Africa for very obvious reasons. Nature. I want to see wildlife and I want to see their plants. I really enjoy South African natives. They are kind of really alien looking, and I know they have a lot of biodiversity over there that is not to be found anywhere else in the world. And then giraffes are by far my favorite animal, followed by elephants, and I would love to go on a safari and see them there. And the second country I would like to travel to is China. I think China has, first of all, super interesting nature, but also super interesting cityscape. I do love a good cityscape, and also China is not that far from Australia, you know. It's kind of nice. It's like a quick flight. So yeah, I feel like the combination of crazy high-tech cityscape and then really tranquil, beautiful nature is definitely something I would love to see, and I've never been to either of those two. Next question, moss versus coco coir. When, which, where, who, what, why? I've got a full video where I compare all types of supports, moss poles with plastic backed moss poles, with coco coir poles, with trellis, with a piece of bark. And basically I think coco coir poles to me are the most useless ones because they don't really offer any functionality apart from being a support, but on top of that they're actually quite ugly. So if you don't want to go for a moss pole because it's too much work, then I think just go for a piece of bark, because at least that looks true to nature and it looks good. Coco coir looks hideous and has as little functionality as bark. So I personally have no application for coco coir. I have 0 coco coir poles in my collection, and I haven't had a coco coir pole in my collection for the last 5 years. But yeah, in a nutshell, I have no application for coco coir. I would always go for moss. But if you want to, if you want a little bit more information around that, I'm really specific in that video. The main issue with coco coir is that it just has no water retention. Next question: do you do anything fancy for your anthuriums in ambient conditions in winter? I've been a bit nervous to move some of my anthuriums into ambient because the leaves might not like it when they emerge. I'm in Newcastle, by the way, which is just maybe 2 hours up from Sydney. To be honest, no, I don't really do anything. I think the only thing that I am trying to do is, like, if I know that a plant is outgrowing the IKEA cabinet that offers amazing conditions for anthuriums, I'll try and move it into my ambient conditions before we hit winter. So maybe move it there at the beginning of spring, ideally, so the plant can get used to my ambient conditions during the best time of the conditions, right? So usually spring is the best. Summer can be a little bit too hot and dry at times as well. So I moved them into my ambient conditions in spring, and then they've got spring, summer and autumn to get used to it before the conditions get kind of the worst. Of course, is that realistic that that always happens? No. Realistically, I actually move my plants out of the IKEA cabinet whenever they're too big, not according to the season. It's only like if I'm like, okay, wait another 2 months and then it's spring. I'm sure you can wait another 2 months, for example. But apart from that, I really just don't do anything. I'm just realistic. I know that with any plant, when you change the conditions of any plant, the plant will go through a little bit of shock to get used to the new conditions. It might drop a couple of leaves. The next leaf might reduce a little bit in size, but that's okay. It will also bounce back. So really, I don't do anything fancy. I obviously try and have the ambient conditions as good as possible for all of my plants if they moved just in there or if they've always been there. But yeah, just hope for the best and be realistic with your expectations. Be patient with them. And maybe just check in on them a little bit more often, because it's not just that the conditions changed as a result of the conditions changing. You might also have to change the way that you care for this plant, as in like the watering frequency or, you know, the amount of water that you use and so on. Sorry, there is no like magic trick where I'm like, do this and everything will be fine. Just hoping for the best. Please tell me how you fight insect pests. Thank you. I don't fight any insects at all. And then Disclaimer, I'm not super good at pest treatment. I'm definitely not an authority, and you definitely should not listen to me, but I can just tell you what I use. For spider mites, I use killamite. For thrips, I use contender spray, which I also use for aphids, which I've only had really rarely, but I recently had some in my cabinet actually. And for gnats, I use 10 lin drops, and I don't use them often. I don't know if people over-exaggerate on the internet, but I've been growing plants for 6 years now. I had lots and lots of spider mites in my life. I had lots and lots of thrips in my life. I've had scale, I've had aphids, I've had a few mealybugs, but never really anything bad and so on. I don't know if people over-exaggerate or if other people in other countries might really struggle with pests much more, because I'm pretty relaxed on them. Like, I see thrips and sometimes I'm like, tomorrow or the day after or something like that. You're like, I don't freak out and like, oh my god, it's gonna eat my whole collection and so on. Like, I think the worst that has ever happened is maybe that, like, well, a few leaves dropped and I had to cut them off, and then the plant looked a bit ugly, and it takes a little while longer for the plant to recover, but it's always kind of just visual. I never really had pests to the extent where the pests just completely made the plant die. And most of my approach is really just proactive. I try and keep my plants clean by just showering them just with water. That seems to help. Obviously it doesn't eradicate them, but it helps for them to not really, like, you know, get stuck in those leaves. And I do also think that healthy plants that are grown in good conditions, you know, they're like at their best, I think they just have a better time naturally fighting off pests or not letting pests really get to them or harm them to the extent. So I think just having healthy plants really helps as well. But yeah, it's mainly proactive, and I think it's also a mindset thing. Like, pests can really ruin this hobby for you, because you will always find pests. There's not a single day, like at any day I could walk through my collection and show you pests. If I really wanted to find pests, I would bloody find them. And that's probably been the case for the last 6 years of growing, right? So if I would freak out every time I have pests, I would basically be in a perpetual panic attack, right? So there's no point in freaking out about it. Just accept it and hope for the best. And I think that sort of mindset almost helps as well. I mean, I'm not super spiritual, but you know, sometimes when you put more attention towards something, you feed the beast, you know what I mean? So just chill, just relax. That's my approach. But yeah, as I mentioned, you could be a completely different ball game if you're in a different country that might have different types of thrips. So for example, Europe I think has like black thrips. I think we have black thrips too, but I hear so many horror stories from European growers about like thrips being so crazy. And it's like, they're not that bad. They're like a bit annoying, but they're not like terrible, right? But yeah, I don't know. Jan, have you ever crossed paths with any snakes in Australia? If so, how many, how big were they, and how did you feel about meeting them? To be honest, if my memory doesn't trick me, I think I've only ever seen one snake, and I was backpacking in Queensland, and that was 12 years ago. And it was quite a big snake, just somewhere like on the corner of the parking lot near the hostel. And I saw it, and I walked past it, and I moved on from that. There can obviously be snakes if you go into like the national parks and so on, and you do need to be careful to not step on them. But to be honest, I've never really seen one, apart from that one that was in the parking lot 12 years ago. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like the other day, it's actually funny that you asked me this question, because the other day I saw Farmer Nick, I don't know if you know Farmer Nick on Instagram, he uploaded a story of a snake, and he's in upstate New York, and he uploaded a photo of a snake finding his way into his greenhouse because it liked the heating in there. I was like, okay, so Farmer Nick in New York has actually, is he New York based? Maybe it was New York. So he has, at this stage, more snake experience than me living in Australia. And spiders, definitely you see way more spiders, but also like, they just do their own thing, like, you know. I think it's definitely a stereotype where people are like, oh my god, Australia, full of spiders and snakes. Yes, it can be full of spiders and snakes, but you're most likely not going to go camping in the bush, right? I mean, I don't do camping, guys. It's not like you walk through Sydney and there's like snakes like next to you on the path, or like, you know what I mean? They exist, but I think people from overseas think they're like birds, like left, right and center. They're not, at least where I live, at least in Sydney. I think Queensland, obviously the higher you go, the more tropical it gets, the more likely they'll have bigger snakes, I think. I recently downsized my collection greatly as I got a new puppy, and moving apartment made me realize that I really need to downsize. How many plants do you have currently, and have you ever thought about downsizing your current collection? Hang on, I think I want one more, maybe two more. For sure, I think about that all the time. Every time I go on holidays, I even think like, wouldn't it be so nice to have no plants? I would like nothing I have to worry about. That would be so cool. And I would be like, I could travel the world and never come back home. Obviously, would still need to take care of my Bebe, who sleeps in the sun over there, by the way, now. I think it's too far away for you. But then, at the end of the day, you know, most of the time I'm actually not on holiday. So I do love having my plants, but I definitely think about downsizing a lot. I actually don't even think I have that many plants. Hang on, did you ask you how many plants I have? How many plants do I have currently? No idea, actually. Absolutely no idea. And I think it also depends on, I think we shouldn't count the ones in the garden, for example, because they're not that much work, right? They're just there and do their own thing. So indoors, probably 100 or so. That could, I don't know. I think I have more quality over quantity, so I don't think it's that many. But I do definitely think I could downsize. And maybe with the next move, I will downsize a little bit, but then there's an added element for me. It's like, well, my plant collection is also my business. If I have less plants, I have less content, less income and so on. But then hopefully a smaller place will also cost less and so on. So as a private person, I would definitely love to downsize my collection a little bit and focus and give each plant a little bit more room to breathe and grow and optimize. But as a business, I enjoy having all of the plants that I have. But yeah, I think I definitely don't plan on increasing my collection much. I think I'm definitely more likely to downsize than to upsize. What is your least favorite plant, and why did you think it was a good idea getting it? Oh, let me think about this. Actually, I don't really have like least favorite plants. I mean, plants that I sometimes don't like that much anymore, or that I feel like aren't visually that pleasing to me, they usually just go into the garden and they have to fight for their survival, and then because they take up no space and no effort, I'm not mad at them anymore. I think Majestic, Philadelphia Majestic would be a good answer, because I bought it because I wanted to complete the family photo. Majestic is a hybrid of Soliroy and Veracosum, and I wanted to have all of the heart-shaped species in their hybrids. And it was quite expensive back then as well, but I really, really wanted it, and it was actually one of my favorite plants for a while, until it started just growing more and more. It grew too big, it grew too mature, and it didn't look very good. And I've now been struggling for the last 3.5 years to grow a juvenile version of this again that I actually enjoy looking at. I think it looked good in like 2022. And ever since then it's just started looking ugly, taking up too much space and so on. So I thought it was a good idea because I thought, well, technically it has good DNA. It is kind of exactly the plant that I like. It's a hard-leafed crawler, it's a hard-leafed climber, has a little bit of velvet DNA in it as well and so on. But I think in reality it's just not that pretty. Or it's just not yielding the results. I've seen other people grow a really nice specimen. I think I'm not upset with the species or the hybrid in itself. I think I'm more upset with my specific specimen. I just don't think it's really that nice. Let me show you the baby. Are you enjoying the sun? You're so gorgeous. Hey, I was just joking when I was talking about the travel. I would never go away for too long because I've got you at home. Oh, that sun is so nice coming through. I think I might be able to turn off the heater, huh? Hey Jan, you introduced me to moss pulse and my plants have never been the same. They grow the biggest leaves, but I noticed on some that the root system in the pot still grows very vigorously. My question is if you had a problem with root-bound plants on moss pulse before, if you repotted them in a bigger pot, or if you don't see a difference in leaf size and just leave it at that till you do chop and extend. I've had the problem especially on slow climbing plants like my philodendron El Choco Red and plants that have very strong root growth like my monstera deliciosa, variegata. Any tips and tricks? Thank you in advance. Greetings from Austria. Both. There's definitely been root bound plants where I feel like I don't need to repot now. It will be just fine. But there's also been root-bound plants, as you said, for example, the El Choco as well, that are potted up outside of my chop and extend or extension processes. I mean, normally, rule of thumb is when I give my plant the first moss pole, 90 centimeter moss pole, I put it in a 14 centimeter pot, and then with the extension, when I upgrade it to 180 centimeters, then I give it a 20 centimeter pot. But those are just rules that I made up. You know what I mean? Like, there's actually the main reason behind these rules is that the pot, the see-through pots that I like to use come in two sizes. So that's it. And I like to keep the same pot size, 20 centimeter, because I have so many decorative planters that fit the 20 centimeter pots. But over the years, I've definitely upgraded many to eventually 25 centimeter pots, especially if it's on a thick moss pole, like the thick row vertical ones. If it's multi-planted, like my Adansonia, for example, is 3 big cuttings, and monsteras have huge root systems. My deliciosa variegata is actually also in a 25 centimeter pot, not a 20 centimeter pot. My Thai is, I think, in a 40 centimeter pot, for example. So yes, I still apply judgment and go outside of my rule where I feel like it would be beneficial to the plant. But I also think that not giving it a larger pot and leaving it a bit root bound is totally fine if you at least provide nutrients with your watering. I wouldn't really stress about it too much. I think it's also a thing about like, oh, do I have all of the pots available right now, or do I need to go to Bunnings? Or only have a 20 centimeter pot? Well, so be it, and so on. But yeah, I mean, of course, if you can give the root system more room to expand, it will be beneficial to the plant. And yeah, I think as you identified correctly, it mainly applies to the slow climbing plants. But also keep in mind that monsteras, for example, often love to be root bound, and only once they're root bound they really focus on leaf growth. So you might just encourage more root growth, which I personally want leaf growth. Also keep in mind that if just because the pot is root bound doesn't mean that maybe the moss pole is root bound. Maybe there's plenty of room for the plant to keep growing through the moss pole, and then you are giving the plant more room for roots without having to do anything. Suppose really up to you, depends on how many resources you've got available, how much space you've got available, and how much time you've got available. But overall, yeah, go for it. Could you do a video where you rate the products you use, meaning the fertilizers and plant food from best to worst? I've done a video where I show you all of the products that I use. I can't do really a ranking of different products because I don't use enough variety of products. Like I use 2 types of nutrients. I use GT, and then last year started using worm castings, but I'm still, even after 1 year of using it, I would still say I'm in the early day stages with worm castings. It's really hard to see the direct result of a nutrient. I can't run like proper experiments, right, and have like 2 plants where all other conditions are the exact same, all other parameters are the exact same, and the only thing I'm testing is the nutrient provision, and then come to a conclusion which nutrient is the best. And even if you have a sample size of 1, that wouldn't be a very reliable experiment. So realistically, you would have to do that in a much larger scale, or you would need to drill down into the nutrients and understand if, in theory, the nutrients would be sufficient and so on. Anyway, at the end of the day, what I do is I use products, and then hopefully my plants look good on the back of it. But I haven't used that many products, if you know what I mean. You know, like it's not like every week I try a new nutrient. So I can't really rank them. I can just tell you what I use. And I've already done a full video on that. It's not like, or you have like sunscreen and you test them for SPF in a lab and then they give you a ranking. Unfortunately, I can't produce that. But also, I wouldn't stress too much. Like, I know, of course, nutrient provision is very, very important, but I don't think the nutrients in themselves are really going to make all the difference. First and foremost, you need to grow your plants in good conditions. And then, once you set their potential, you can realize their potential through nutrient provision. And yes, of course, I love the products that I've used. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been using them for the last 4 or 5 years. But could I have the same results with a different product? Probably, to be honest. You know, I think in the long run, which exact fertilizer you use is probably not the deciding factor if you're successful in this hobby or not. I would love to know your take on this actually in the comments. Give me a percentage, like to what percentage do you think the nutrient contributes? Imagine the plant is growing in perfect conditions, perfect substrate, watered perfectly, everything is perfect. And then you have one plant that you provide no nutrients to, one plant that you provide a regular nutrient to, and then another plant you provide a premium nutrient to. What do you think would be the difference in growth? I reckon there would be quite a big difference between no nutrient provision and nutrient provision, but I don't know how much difference there would be within the actual nutrients. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not giving nutrients enough credit. Maybe I'm just really lucky that I found really good nutrients straight away. I do know that GT Australia is good for sure, but I don't know how bad other nutrients are, let's say. I'm sure they're all good, otherwise why would they produce it in the first place? You know what I mean? Like, come on, your job is to produce nutrients. Surely you can produce nutrients that work. We're not the first person to have ever grown a plant. I don't know. As you can tell, I obviously love talking. At the end of the day, I don't think there needs to be a ranking. I don't think there needs to be a list of like best to worst. It either works or it doesn't. So to me, it's more a yes or no, like a black and white thing. And yes, the nutrients that I use work, but I feel like other nutrients would also work. So it's a yes on nutrient provision at large, if that makes sense. I think other things like the cost of the product, the ease of acquiring the product, that is more important, you know, like if it costs you an arm and a leg and you need to ship that nutrient from overseas, maybe just go with a local nutrient that's probably going to give you at least 85% of the same results. But priorities, I suppose, depends on what you are after, but I can't give you a ranking, sorry. Do you struggle with downsizing plants? I have plants I don't like anymore, but I just can't get rid of them. Very similar question to the one before. No, I don't really struggle with that at all. I think because I usually just pop them into the garden and then survival of the fittest takes care of them, and or I give them to Tim, for example, so then they're technically still in my collection. Tim just lives down the road, right? And I reserve the right to take cuttings of the plant at any time, but it's not in my collection. So no, I don't really struggle with that, but let's have that conversation again when I actually am in a position to move and I have to downsize and I have to actually get rid of some plants. I think then it would be hard. I think with me, it's like if I have to do it because I physically don't have the space and I have to downsize, it would be much harder than if I just come up with the idea of downsizing. Like, I need to have the desire, I need to have the want to downsize, and then it's not a problem. If I'm forced to, then it's a problem. So I think it's more of an attitude issue with me. I just don't like being told what to do. Hello there, to be honest, I could really use some advice for moving my plant collection. I'm moving countries in a few weeks. I have a feeling that you've already moved by the time you see this. Sorry, I've been busy. A long drive, about 12 hours. Any tips for secure and transplanting prep in general from a plant moving expert like yourself? Oh, thank you. Not the reputation I wanted to have, but I'm glad I can help other people move successfully with it. I hope that you have found my moving vlogs and that you saw what I did. I get a big van that has the grid on the side. To be honest, I thought that was default. I thought all moving vans come with that grid because they always came with that grid when I hired one. Turns out I just got lucky. Maybe it's an Australian thing. Maybe it's just that specific company that I've used. I think it was Orana is the company. But I think you can just search for those vans specifically. So that van then just has a grid, and then I just use hooks, hook it into the grid of the van and hook it into the moss pile. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm just tilting in these little bits that I cut off earlier so they don't spike the plants. Yeah, and I have to say, moving moss poles was much easier because of the hooking mechanism. So I can use the moss pole in itself to hook it there. And then the plant can't fall, right? Because it's hanging. As soon as something is standing, it can fall and slide and so on. Sometimes, obviously, don't just use one hook. I use like 2 hooks on either side, so it also can't twist. But I was fortunate that all of my moves were literally within 1 kilometer of each other. So I moved 1 kilometer this way, then I moved 1 kilometer this way, then I moved 1 kilometer this way. So once they're loaded into the van, there was a very short drive. But I think the most likely where things go wrong is actually the loading up and unloading, right? That's where you, you know, smash your leaves into other leaves, or they get caught and they rip, or they might fall or whatever. Once they're securely hooked into the van, doesn't really matter if you drive for 5 minutes or 12 hours. I think that's what common sense tells me, but maybe by now you've moved and you can tell us if it was successful or not. So I found the moving part actually for my moss poles quite easy. I struggle much more moving smaller plants, but I just put them in big crates and I just make sure that the crate is pretty packed tightly, so there's no wiggle room, and then they're also very unlikely to fall. And yeah, AJ just gives me all of the crates because she has lots of them for her business anyway. I'm sure you can also go to like Bunnings or a hardware store and ask if they have any spares. Anyway, I hope your move worked well. Now on top of that, you obviously also need to consider, are you maybe moving in winter and the back of that truck is going to get really cold, or are you going to move in summer and you're driving 12 hours through the boiling hot sun? Is there air conditioning in the back, and so on? All things I totally did not have to worry about. So maybe I'm not the moving expert after all, but I hope you found my moving vlogs and hope that gave you a little bit of inspiration. And my other recommendation would actually be to just accept the fact that there will be a little bit of damage on the back of it. You're moving your entire plant collection. Don't worry, the damage is most likely just cosmetic, right? It will keep growing and hopefully grow better than ever in your new house, because I'm sure you selected the house to work for the plants first and foremost, right? Do you ever measure how much light your indoor plants receive, or do you just rely on trial and error? I actually done a whole video on this, and basically no, I don't measure how much light my plants receive. The only time I ever measure that is just for video because somebody else asked me for the number. Once I have that number, I've never done anything with that number. I've never even checked whether or not that number is sufficient or not, because, well, the plant is telling me that it was already sufficient before I knew the number. So I go with trial and error. I think the only time it is somewhat reasonable to maybe use a light meter is when you use grow lights, because the grow light is consistent, so you could measure the light output at various distances and then kind of research how much your specific plant likes, and then you should be pretty safe putting your plant there knowing that it will grow. With natural light that just doesn't work, because, well, right now for example it's super sunny, in 5 hours it will be dark, right? And in between there's various levels of light coming through. So natural light changes way too much throughout the day, throughout the season, depending on the weather and so on, for you to actually do one measurement and get any result out of it. You will literally need to take like thousands of measurements and then hope that the average kind of is meaningful, which is probably not. So I think measuring light with grow lights works. Measuring light with natural light doesn't necessarily work. Look out for signs that the plants give you, like leggy growth, smaller leaves, no growth at all, large internodal spacing, sending out runners. Those are all signs that the plant is looking for more light and is not receiving enough right now. That I think is more meaningful than a number on my phone. The other thing that people said in the comments, because I was very vocal in that video, as I am, Other people suggested is they use light meters not to reference back to like a master spreadsheet somewhere. They use light meters to assess their own differences within their lighting environment. So for example, measure here and then measure there, and then you know that this is brighter than this. So it makes sense if you're just using the numbers to relate them to each other within your environment. And I think I agree with that, because then that is kind of trial and error. You're just doing trial and error via numbers instead of via visual science of the plant. Hey Jan, what's your favorite houseplant creator? Good question, because I just got a message from Irene. I do love Irene, and Irene uploads so little content that even I can keep up with it. Irene is leafing around, in case you don't know, but how could you not know her, especially after all my Bangkok vlogs? I have answered this question many times before, to be honest, so it might not be a surprise to anybody, but I don't consume much planty content, to be honest. It's all consuming for me as it is. I film a lot of content, I edit all of my own content, I try to reply to all of the comments on my YouTube channel. I, on top of that, do Instagram, TikTok and Facebook. That's enough, no? That's enough planty content for one person. And on top of that, I actually do my plant care, you know what I mean? Like on top of that, I actually have my hobby, which is a little more excessive than I suppose the average houseplant grower, I'm assuming. So I also need a breather, so I don't watch much houseplant content, but I definitely like Irene because I like that she goes and looks at other people's gardens, you know what I mean? So this is somebody else who's created their own little oasis over here, and she just shares it with us, which is the most inspiring to me, because that's how I want to be. I want to use plants to create a beautiful environment indoors and in my garden. I'm obviously limited by being a renter, but if I would own this place, holy moly, I would go nuts with plantifying everything and making things a little bit more permanent and so on. So I like that, because there's like real human people, there's like the end consumer, the end person, like us, you know what I mean? Like we are the end consumer of these plants. We're not a nursery that just grows these plants to then sell them. I enjoy that. I enjoy watching content of people that show nicely grown gardens or that take pride in growing nice gardens. I'm not a big fan of creators that just show you plant hauls, for example, where it's just like, oh, look at what I bought, or creators that want to sell plants in the first place, which I understand. Sometimes you got to sell plants to recoup some of the costs. It's fine, but it's just not what I go on the internet to watch, right? And I'm sure, like, I mean, there was a time where I was in my accumulation phase where I watched a lot of creators that do hauls, show their wish list and so on. And I do that content too, hoping that there are some people in the early stages of their plant journey that might get inspired by those videos. But that's not my personal journey anymore. I aspire to create a garden or an oasis or like an environment. So I find that much more interesting. Sean, the other guy that I was in Thailand with, for example, I like all of his videos where he talks about his own plants in his house, or where he shows us a nice garden that he visits and so on. But too much like plant fair content where they're just talking about the newest monstera hybrid and whatever, it's not necessarily something that I need to consume. At the end of the day, what's my favorite creator? I do really like Sean and Irene, but I think I like them more as people than I like them as creators, to be honest. The only other one that I can really think of that I really like is Crystal, Plants by Crystal. But I don't like her for her plants or like her care tips. Again, that's not necessarily something that is relevant to me. I also don't think she makes these videos for me. I like her personality. She's authentic, she's fun, she's transparent, she doesn't take herself too seriously. She's just like, she brightens up the room, you know what I mean? And I'm drawn to those sort of people, you know, that kind of get me in a good mood. I just feel like it would be really hard to be surrounded by Crystal and be grumpy, you know what I mean? So I do like her, and she doesn't take the whole thing too seriously, but is actually massively successful in what she does. And I think she deserves every single one of her followers and everything. So I really like her. I think that's also the creator that I want to be, but I think I'm just a little more opinionated than her, and I can't shut up about my opinions. So every now and then I get myself in trouble for calling like plants ugly and so on, you know, and then, oh, I'm in deep, deep trouble. I just don't like to sugarcoat. That's the main thing. I think that's what you guys like about me as well. I don't sugarcoat. If I see something that I don't like, I'm going to be pretty vocal on it. But not because I want to be mean. That is literally just the way that I am. If I see something that I don't like, I'm going to be brutally honest, you know. And if you can't handle that, then what are you doing here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, at least I'm consistent. Tell us more about your water. Do you use tap water, rainwater, or filtered? Is it hard or soft? What is the pH of your tap water? I use tap water, and when it rains, I put my plants in the rain. I don't actually collect rainwater at this stage. I would love to have my own house and get a big water tank. I mean, yeah, I know I can put buckets out there, but it rains so frequently in Sydney. The likeliness of it raining and me having time to put my plants out is actually quite high. So I often just put them out there. I would love to like redirect all of the rain from the roof into a big water tank and so on. Can't do that as a renter. But so yeah, basically I just use tap water majority of the times unless the plants happen to just stand in the rain. I have no idea about my tap water, but I think I measured it once, didn't I? Hang on, let's have a look. Tap water, Sydney. Looks like the pH is 7.2. Sydney's water is considered soft with a hardness level of about 50 milligrams per litre. So I think it's soft. Honestly, it's one of these things that has just always worked for me. So I never really looked into it. Some people have messaged me before. They're like, oh, but when you spray your plants with water to clean them, don't you get like the little, is it calcium? Whatever it is, the little white marks. I don't. So I think that's when the water is hard, right? So yeah, I think I'm just lucky. I've done a video with Vivosum before. Didn't I do that? Hang on, let's have a look. Let's have a look at this together.
It's neat, but sometimes it's good to collect some data.
Here, it says tap water is 7.47, that's the pH, right? Tap is 7.47, tap with nutrients is 5.5, rain is 6.55, and filtered is 7.78. And the ideal for aeroids is 5.5 to 6.5. So basically, tap water with nutrients, can you see this? The nutrients have significantly lowered the pH of my tap water, which made it more ideal for aeroids.
Especially the difference in pH with the addition of nutrients. Learn more about Vivosum products and receive 15% off the entire store by visiting the link in my bio and using code SPG50.
You can, by the way, still use that discount code if you want. There you go. I have measured it before, but when I measured it, it was basically just confirmed that whatever I've got going on is already working. So there was no action on the back of it for me. There was, you know, like I didn't have to do anything. But yeah, maybe it's helpful for anybody else. Have you ever thought about doing more traditional gardening, like growing tomatoes or herbs? I actually have done that, and I've done videos about them as well, which literally nobody has ever watched, I think. The problem with my garden is that whenever I grow a tomato or a cucumber, there's just way too many possums coming and eating it straight away. I literally had like one cucumber as a harvest and I think half a tomato. And that's okay. I'm happy to feed the wildlife, but it just didn't really give me the motivation to do it again. And I know I can also kind of like cover it so that they can't get to it, but then that would look really bad. I know that you don't need a lot of space to grow your own veggies, but I think, first of all, I don't have enough sun in my garden for a lot of them. And secondly, I think I have such a small garden as it is. I want that garden to look nice. And I just went for the aesthetics over the functionality. But if I would love to have more land and then have a whole traditional garden next to my tropical garden. And then I would also like to have a cactus garden in the front and so on. So definitely something that I would love to try. I just didn't really have the space, conditions, and all of that available to make it work with my desire for aesthetics as well. I also know that there's these like the farm stand things, the vertical kind of things that people can have in their houses even, that I would actually be interested in trying. So yeah, if you're a company that produces that and you would like to sponsor me, I am available. I wouldn't mind trying that actually, because I do eat a lot of veggies. I eat a lot of salad, like a lot. So it would be good. If I could just grow lettuce, like that would already be so useful. Lettuce and cucumbers, that would be extremely useful. With cucumbers also, I was never able to shake the mildew. I think Sydney is just a bit too humid for it at times. And I do have a little herb garden out there actually. But I got coriander and parsley confused, so I have a whole lot of parsley now, which I absolutely hate. Please make your videos in Spanish. Look, puedo hablar el español, pero solamente un poco. Definitely not enough to make a whole bloody video about it. YouTube, let me actually address this because I get this in the comment section quite a bit. Recently-ish, over this year or so, YouTube has released this feature where it creates translated, dubbed audio tracks in different languages. I think it's definitely German, Italian. I would have surely thought Spanish is in there, given it's one of the most spoken languages. Now that's obviously AI generated, it's not my voice. They just take the transcript of my video and then they just auto translate it. And I kept that option on because there are just people that don't speak English as their first language and might not actually understand what I'm saying. And at the end of the day, I would like to reach as many people as possible. So if I can break down barriers, like a language barrier, then so be it. You can, by the way, change that. So if you live in Germany, let's say, and by default, my video comes up in the German dubbed voice for you, you can just go in that section, in the settings where you change the playback speed. Which, by the way, do you all watch me on double speed? Because that's the idea. The idea is that you watch me in double speed. Nobody can listen to me talk for that long, right? So make it faster. You can change it there, right? So if you don't want to have the dub voice, you can change it yourself. If you do want the dub voice, then go for it. So I kept the option on. I got so many messages saying I should be the one turning it off, but I don't want to turn it off. I want to make my video accessible to everybody. If you don't want to hear it in the dubbed version, then why should I turn it off for everybody? Why don't you just turn it off for yourself? So I'll keep it on. So I'm not too sure why you can't get the Spanish version. It should be there.
Lo que voy a hacer hoy no es específico para un esqueje. También puedes aplicar el mismo principio a una planta pequeña que ya esté en una maceta, pero que aún no tenga una pila de musgo, y quieras darle a esa planta su primera pila de musgo. Echemos un vistazo primero a este esqueje. Este es Philodendron atava poensi y tiene un valor sentimental porque perdí el mío el año pasado.
The best I can offer is YouTube does it automatically. I can't offer that service. You have turned me into a plant hoarder. Love your videos, advice, and of course Bradley. Would love advice on how to bring a monstera deliciosa back from root rot. Just chuck it in water. Monstera deliciosa should be pretty easy going. I've always just propagated my monstera deliciosas in water and ow! Little see, they're sharp. And never really had any issues with that. Now with water propagation, some people tell you to change the water all the time. I hardly ever change water in my water propagations. I would only change the water in my water propagation if I can see that the water is just full of rot and there's like little, ow, that really hurt. And there's like little bits floating around and so on. If I don't see any active rot, I don't change the water because the water actually has growth hormones in it. That, or like the plant sends water, growth hormones into the water that then encourages root growth. So yep, that's the first thing. And then obviously you want to put it in the best possible conditions. Conditions will always set the potential, right? In the tropical rainforest, nobody goes around and water propagates monsteras, right? They all just naturally propagate and they fall off and like fall there and then re-root over there and so on, right? It's because they have good conditions. So I think just water. You can put a bit of hydrogen peroxide in your water. That should prevent rotting as well and oxygenates the water. But I think most importantly, just make sure that you put it in a really bright spot and avoid cold. So for example, you could put your propagations on a little heat mat. That should also encourage root growth, which I, by the way, do not do. I have best success propagating in my IKEA cabinet, for example. because of the conditions in there. And then the method in itself isn't also important. I have also propagated in moss before, that also works, but I feel like you have less visibility. I like this, like, you know, in a glass vase, you can see once there's a bit of rot. I really like your channel, it's so helpful. Would you like to share any experiences to kill insects? I'm really frustrated by plants are eaten by insects. Thank you. I don't have any advice for you. I do nothing about insects. And I don't really have a problem. I mean, sometimes I see like caterpillars chewing on some of my leaves, but I'll just take them and throw them into my neighbor's garden. Sorry, neighbor. Don't worry, they're not gardeners. Their garden is not very well maintained, so they probably want the caterpillar for maintenance purposes anyway. So I don't really do anything there. I know Tim had a lot of slugs in his garden, and the problem with slugs is also that his dog Bailey can't eat them because they're very poisonous. So he put some pellets out and that kind of made them disappear. I don't know if they died or if they just went somewhere else. But yeah, I don't really have that issue. So I don't have anything to share with you, unfortunately. I'm sorry. Do you visit Germany often, and do you think you will ever move back there? I now haven't been in 3 years, I think. In July it will be actually exactly 3 years now. So I wouldn't classify this often, but I went often in my 20s. Recently I've been just trying to see something different of the world and not just Germany, Australia, Germany, Australia. Would I ever move back there? Probably not. Sorry, Mom. Oh, she doesn't make it that far into my videos anyway. Probably not. Look, if like maybe my mom and my sister would need help and as a result of that I should be there, then I think that's a perfectly fine reason, right? Obviously. But I don't think I would choose to voluntarily. But I like Germany. I do like it. I like to visit as well. I enjoy it. It's just that there's so much world to see. I do just want to see a few different things because traveling really opens your mind to other experience and other cultures and so on, right? So, yeah. Do you ever feel homesick? Oh my gosh, so many German questions. Would you like to stay permanently in Australia, or sometime in the distant future there is a chance you go back to Germany? Love watching your videos, by the way. I think I answered that apart from the do you feel homesick, which is probably not a surprise, that no, I don't feel homesick. I don't miss Germany, but I definitely miss my German friends and family around. It is more a thing where I would love for them to visit me in Australia or live in Australia, not that I want to go there to visit them. So it's more about the people, not necessarily the place where they are. My question to you is, can I marry you? Nah. Have you ever had any problems with snails in your greenhouse or on your outdoor plants? Oh my god, all of these questions are very similar. I think I just answered that. It was caterpillars, not snails. But yeah, Timmy bought pellets from Bunnings. If you just go there and you ask the person at Bunnings like something about snails, then go for it. We actually have a season over here at some stage when there's also a lot of rain where we had a lot of slugs everywhere, and the slugs would even find their way into the house. Like, I'm not even too sure how, but none of them has ever caused any damage to my plants. I think they're attracted to Bradley's water. They want to go to the water fountain. I still don't know how they get in here, but no, not really. Have you ever propagated alocasias by cutting/slicing the rhizomes? If not, maybe a video idea for an alocasia duplicate. Actually, I have done that long time ago, before I had social media, but I am planning on doing exactly that with my alocasia over here, my cupria. I already have a layer of moss all over her stems or rhizomes for it to air layer first before I chop the rhizome. And of course I'm gonna do a whole video on that as well. So stay tuned, I'm already a step ahead of you. I have no questions, I just love you. Oh, that's very nice. And then we have only one question left. Oh my god, I'm racing through these questions. I haven't even finished my moss poles yet. Why don't you sell plants, duplicates and those that don't spark joy anymore more often? Do you feel bad about it? Sending love from Germany. Look, I've recently done a sale with AJ for some of my leftover plants, and I think that was the first time I sold a plant in like 3 years. First of all, just because a plant doesn't spark joy anymore doesn't mean that it's not good content. Just because I might not like a plant doesn't mean that nobody else might like that plant, so I think there's still a point in making a video about it. And also, negativity works really well. So if things go wrong or something doesn't spark me joy, me setting myself the challenge of trying to find the joy in this plant again is a content idea. Right? So that's why I hold on to many of them. Secondly, I have lots of friends that, you know, support me with my job, like Tim, for example, and I much rather give those plants to a friend because it might spark joy for them. And, you know, as a little thank you for their support. I think that to me is more important than money. The other reason why I don't like selling plants, and okay, that one sounds like a bit weird maybe, but I don't necessarily enjoy meeting people in that setting, let's say. I find it very annoying to come up with like a time and a place to meet with somebody to then like exchange the plant. You know what I mean? Definitely don't want people to come to my house to pick up their plant because I value my privacy. So I would need to like meet them somewhere public for them to pick up the plant. I don't want to do shipping. That is just way too much work to now work out like shipping boxes and ship them, and then the plant will suffer and all of that, you know. Plus, like, most of my plants are way too big to be shipped. Wouldn't send little things. I mainly have like the bottom parts of my pots, right? So they couldn't ship them. You need to pick them up. So I don't really want to like meet somebody for them to pick it up. And I don't want to work according to their schedule. I absolutely hate them. It's like, oh, I need to be home on Tuesday at 6 because somebody's picking up a plant. And then like, oh, my whole Tuesday plan is now kind of like based on having to be home at 6 o'clock. What if I don't want to be home at 6 o'clock? I just don't like the idea. Realistically, I'm probably home in 95% of the times. I just don't like the idea. I hate that. I also have no idea what to price my plants at, right? I wouldn't really know what to charge for them. I don't want to overcharge because then it feels like I'm like ripping people off, but at the same time I also don't want to undercharge because then, for example, I am making small businesses like AJ look bad because, well, she relies on selling plants for a living, and if then somebody like me basically gives them out for free, then, you know, I'm not necessarily supporting my friend's business. I'm actually now actively competing with my friend's business, which is not what I want to do. I sometimes cop a little flag for not supporting enough small businesses. Spoiler alert, none of the small businesses support me either. But the small businesses that I do support are my friend's businesses, and I'm not asking anything back from them. But I also don't want to compete with them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be their competitor. So if somebody wants to buy a plant, I much rather refer them back to my friend's business so that my friend can also make her business work for herself. I'm in the business of selling knowledge and entertainment, but you don't need to pay for it. So I'm selling it to you for free, basically. That to me makes more sense. Would my plants spark joy for somebody else? Yeah. But my plants do spark joy. They either spark joy by me giving them to a friend, or they might spark joy for thousands by me turning it into a video instead. So those are kind of like all of the reasons why I don't really like to sell my plants. Obviously, I considered at some stage, should I maybe have a rare plant business and sell plants? Because back then, rare plants were like a very, very hot topic, you know, and people were making lots and lots of money on the back of that. But I also knew that that's only gonna last so long. As soon as there's money to be made, suddenly all sorts of people are interested in plants. It's like frickin' Labubu. It's a little children's toy, but suddenly, now that they sell for a lot of money and are super trendy, there's like grown-ass men waiting in line not to ever own a labubu. They don't care about labubu. They don't care, as they should, by the way. Nobody should care about labubu that much. But they don't care about labubu. They care about making a profit on the back of buying a labubu and then selling it to somebody who actually wants the labubu. And that happens with everything that is popular and trendy and you can make money with. So there was a time where lots and lots of people were suddenly getting into plants, not because they're into plants, they're into money. They're like money, you know. So I knew that it's only going to take a very short amount of time until the market is saturated, and then those people that like to make money suddenly don't end up making all too much money from their plants anymore. They don't have a passion for plants, so they're going to get back out of the hobby, and that's exactly what happened. There were so many plant stores at some stage in Australia, and suddenly there's not that many left. Right? So I kind of anticipated that, and I always knew that selling plants was never going to be like the thing that I want to do. Besides the fact that it has way too much overhead and, you know, your stock can die and so on. I always knew that I would much rather sell an intangible product, aka knowledge, entertainment, and so on. And I'm sticking to that. I know this answer was way longer than you wanted, but I'm running out of questions and I want to finish this moss pole. So, have I gone? Did I not skip any? There's so many. Anyway, I do love these Q&As, but we need to switch it up a little bit, guys, because this is like, I think, Q&A 7 or 8 that I've ever made on this channel. And I mean, even just then, there was like a few questions that were very, very similar. And I mean, I don't mind answering the same questions over and over again. I'm just more worried about you guys. Is it getting too repetitive for you? Because I do want to keep it interesting, but maybe you're unaware of the previous Q&As. Like, how can I improve on this sort of Q&A? Or do you like it the way that it is? Like, is there some like fun element that I kind of could turn it into? Can I kind of like gamify the whole thing so it's a little bit more interesting? Can it maybe be a little bit more interactive rather than just me sitting here? Should it be live? I hate lives though. I don't know. I'm not too sure. But if you have any suggestions, that would be nice. Okay, you know what? I can clean up. All that's left is I need to cut the wires. I have a little bit of moss left, but probably not enough for the next one. But that's okay. I need to get more grow vertical poles and prepare a bunch of grow vertical poles for the upcoming spring anyway. So there's probably going to be one more moss pole making session before spring hits anyway. And then hopefully I've made enough moss poles to at least get me through spring. I hope you enjoyed these sort of really chilled sit down Q&A videos. Hopefully they help you in getting to know me a little bit better on a professional and on a personal level, and hopefully that then helps you interpret my videos a little bit better, because I think if you understand me and my humor, then I think the videos are funnier. You know, some little digs and some little jokes here and there and so on, that I think once you get a better understanding of me and the way that I am, I think they'll become funnier. But maybe I'm just delusional. Obviously, everybody thinks their sense of humor is the best sense of humor, right? Also, make sure you give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and click the bell icon if you haven't already, so you get a notification every time I upload. I appreciate your support, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video.